Hi, everyone. This is Jennifer Dickinson, and I am doing Zoom meetings on live to help bar exam applicants study for the bar exam and take the exam. Right now, the exam is going to be in July, and it's going to be online, and we'll get started right now. Tips, and I'm really grateful because Daniel Garrett is a tutor and he's with us tonight and he's going to
Hi,
get
Daniel.
Hey there.
Hi.
You got any initial questions before people jump in? You got the floor all to yourself if you got any.
Well, my hardest subject so far for me is Civ Pro and evidence, but it's basically Civ Pro. I just cannot wrap my head around it.
So Civ Pro is one of those. That was one of my tougher ones, I think, because it's procedural based. You don't have any practical applications since nobody's practiced law before passing the bar, obviously. So that was always a difficult one for me too. But like I tell my students, the more time you can spend right now, even utilizing, Google or researching things and trying to get some kind of practical application for some of the concepts you're learning, because they're the motions and, things like joinder and stuff like that. You just don't have a practical, like you've never done those things in real life. So the more you can kind of branch out and try to get some context for those concepts, probably the easier, at least, to memorize the rules. And then some of those subjects are always going to be difficult. And those are the ones that you want to make sure you have at least a template of sort of how to get through them, even if you don't feel like you did your absolute best on that essay, because it's impossible to feel like, a 9 out of 10 on every subject. It's just literally it's impossible. So be prepared for those subjects that are more difficult. And my theory is just don't let them be like a catastrophe, where you get a really low score. If you get a 55 or something, get that, move on, and then make sure you're prepared for something like professional responsibility that is going to come up, and that can kind of balance out anything, any kind of one of those weaker subjects that might pop up.
Right. Thank you, Daniel. I definitely will do that.
Okay, so I'm going to start at 6 o'clock. I'll let more people in the room when they come in. I want to say hello, everyone. I have another guest tonight. Last week we had Todd from Bar Exam Doctors. Tonight we have Daniel Garrett from BarWinners. Last May 2020, I started these Zoom meetings as a way to help bar applicants with studying for the bar exam. I talked a lot back then, and I've kind of condensed it now to make it less talk and more tips. So the first thing I want to say is that you always have at this particular time when you're studying for the next bar exam, a paradox of choosing between different bar exam review courses. You have to decide what's going to fit with you and then stick with it. Then the second thing I wanted to say was that you need to set up a schedule. And what I did that I thought was absolutely fabulous was I set up my schedule on Outlook, and I have a picture that I'm going to try to share with you. So I'll share the picture with you and stop the video here because basically it took me a few minutes to get that up on the screen. Afternoon. I really do not think that you shouldn't set up a schedule. Hold on a second. That is too. Okay, so here I'm going to show you the schedule because it's outrageous. This is April 2020, and I just created this a couple of days ago because I pretty much wiped out all of my scheduling for the bar exam because I passed. But in April last year, I did not know that I had passed. So I created a schedule that was different than this one. But this is just an example, okay? So the bar exam is supposed to be in July, okay? Now I have another person that passed October 2020 bar exam, and that video is posted on YouTube. And he talks about how he passed the exam. I passed the exam February 2020, and it was in Oakland that I took the exam. I did not feel that I passed it. Um, so I studied in March and I studied in April, but I didn't study to the extent of this. Okay. But what I'm going to point out to you is that on day 6, it talks about doing 33 MBEs in the morning, um, and a PT in the afternoon. I really don't care how you set up your schedule. You need to set it up to your needs. If you're working full time, and you need to get up an hour early in the morning and do a round of PTs, essays, or MBEs, whether it's reading them or actually doing them, um, that's your choices. You need to set up your schedule. If you have a formal bar review program, they have a tailored schedule, whether it's Kaplan or Barbary or um, Bar Exam Doctor or BarWinners or any of the schedules that are out there. You can set up your own schedule to your needs. Uh, they've got to be to your needs. So for two reasons. One, for your own prep, you know you, and number two, you don't want to burn out this early. So anyway, so this is the schedule that I set up, and now I'm going to go back to the video. Um, demanding at this particular point because you don't know what you're going to study from day to day. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Move it on further to what my next topic was. That was my tips for tonight is basically, so I'm going to show you what I also wanted to give you for tonight was this is a sample PT, and you need to set up your screen to do a PT, right? So if you're at the bar exam, you're going to have it either on top to bottom or side to side. I don't know how ExamSoft works. I did not take the bar exam. Some of you repeaters could help me out and explain this, but this is how I set up my screen to do this particular PT that was released in 2013. And you'll notice that I ask certain questions. First off, I have only 4 questions. Who's your boss? Who's your client? What language are you going to be doing? And who am I sending the document to? Um, what type of document? Okay. So the questions that were raised in this PT, I just went ahead and answered them at the very beginning when I was reading it. And you can take notes while you're reading it and put it right in your document. Some people prefer paper. I prefer working right on the screen and doing it there so that you don't have to look down or repeat the stuff over again. You just type it in. So apparently this PT was a letter. So a letter, and it was to a client, an opinion letter. So it's objective, and we both know about an objective letter or memo that you have to argue both sides. You cannot just say your side. You have to say the other side as well. Um, uh, the client is Wendy Martell, so you're going to be addressing that to her. You're going to have the law office header, just like they have on the PT. If you're not a fast typer, then you could just put secretary to insert law office header at the top or whatever. Then you know, the secretary to insert the address, and you have array line. You have you know, a salutation, dear Mr. Martin or Martell or Ms. or whoever she is, or he. I don't know at this point because I haven't read it. Then you have an introduction in a letter. You always have an introduction. Then you have an argument or discussion section, and basically you're going to state the question, analyze the case, the facts. When you say the analyze the case, that's the rule. And then you're going to conclude the next question. Same thing. It's following IRAC right here on the screen. Then you have a final conclusion, and then you have a, you know, basically sincerely. Your letter needs to look like this when you submit it or when time is up. So you need to make sure that you have all the elements in your PT. Lastly, if you will follow this with me here, if you just put in timer in a search down here on your window and you say open, a timer is going to open up. And you'll notice that I have a bar PT timer set up for 1 minute, 1 hour, 20 minutes. And as you all know, a PT takes 90 minutes. I set it up for 10 minutes less because I want to have my PTs done in 80 minutes so that I can read my PT and tailor it to make sure that my sentences are complete, that my rules are complete, that my PT looks polished before that 90 minutes goes up and boom, that PT is off the screen. For first timers, the first couple of PTs you do will not be within 90 minutes, but you can then juggle and figure out your timing issues. And I discussed that in another lecture. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to let the video resume with Daniel Garrett's presentation, and I'm going to put his presentation on the screen. If you don't have a bar review, start thinking about what you're going to do. Think about setting up your schedule. If you've started practicing, go ahead and start recording that on the Excel spreadsheet that I sent you. And then when you do your tests, do them online just like you would have to do at the test. Do them on your computer. Don't do it with paper. It's just so much easier if you do it. And finish early so that you can read them all. And, you know, if you're a first timer, you're probably not going to finish your first PT in the 90 minutes. It's going to take you probably longer, and that's okay. What you want to do is when the timer goes off, you want to make a note of when it went off and then how long it took to complete it. And then you've got to figure out how to assess and juggle your time to make it so that you can do it within time. Sorry for the repeat. The one thing I do want to say is that I'm very happy that Daniel has come tonight. And the reason is because having a guest that is different than what I teach, you can learn from both of us. And what I mean by that is that nobody has all the answers on this. Everyone has their own style, and it is to your advantage to hear from more than just one person. So let me tell you a little bit about Daniel. He has been a law school and bar exam tutor for several years, and he became the owner of BarWinners back in 2019. So I'm going to switch it right forward to him.
Other commitments, there's sort of the traditional straight out of law school taker, and then there's a lot of other people that are in a second profession, or again they're a full-time worker or part-time, or they just have a lot of commitments that normal adults have. So to that end, your schedule and your sort of personal philosophy will probably need to be tweaked a lot from kind of what you see on the more standard bar preps like a Barbary or a Themis. So something that is definitely valid and something to keep in mind. Did everybody, I'm assuming the email went out with the FAQ, Jennifer? Okay. So I'm going to leave the chat up here, but I'm going to be looking at the FAQ and just point out a few sort of key spots in here over the next 10 minutes or so. If anybody has a question, interrupt me at any time, or definitely put something in the chat. I'm going to be looking at the chat as well, because I can go over this forever, but I want to make sure I'm actually helping people and asking questions that are going to help you rather than the stuff that I can ramble on about for hours and hours. So looking at the FAQ, to that end, we were just talking about scheduling, looking at the top of page 2 with how many hours a day should I study. It really, really varies from person to person and situation to situation. What you want to do is understand from here, from now, March 30th until the bar exam date in late July, sort of what's your study, like overall study schedule going to be. And I'll use an example. So for some first time takers, they are still in school, they're 3Ls, they're taking finals, and they're not doing much right now because it's just a little too much on their plate, but they would be going kind of full time, so to speak, those 6 to 8 hour days at the end of May. And so they'll have about, give or take, 9 weeks of that kind of full on study. If you're starting to study now, obviously you have some flexibility there where you can do sort of more of a front load and even out your studying throughout. So perfect. I love the questions. For full time now, so start studying now. And if you're going to be working full time, especially up until the bar exam, like I always recommend, if you can, of course, it's not always feasible, to try to get a week off. The more time, the better. But again, these are personal situations that are unique to everybody. I would definitely begin studying now, though. And what you want to focus on now, I tell every new student, give me some kind of a list. Doesn't need to be exact, but you want to rank the subjects sort of strong, medium, weak, and then go in reverse order. And you want to really use this time not to memorize. So if civil procedure is a difficult subject, that's a subject you would want to tackle first. And again, not for memorization purposes, but for understanding the concepts. What is, the difference between subject matter and personal jurisdiction? Make sure you understand how that works. Different motions for, directed verdict or summary judgment or a new trial, sort of understand how those all interplay, get the whole timeline of filing a complaint till the end with something like a motion for a new trial, and understand that timeline. So get all the concepts down that you can, because the more you understand sort of the big picture with some of these subjects and a little bit more on a conceptual level, it's going to be easier to not only issue spot, but later on, once you get into June and July, it's going to be easier to memorize the concepts at that point. But I would definitely start studying now. And as Jennifer was saying, make a study schedule. And the key to study schedule making is just be realistic. It's great to be ambitious and say you're going to study X number of hours a day or a week, but you don't want to set yourself up to, not meet those goals. So I would start with something, if it's an hour a night, or if it's 3 hours on Friday night, 2 each on Saturday and Sunday, nothing Monday through Thursday, whatever it might be that fits your schedule. Be realistic, create that, and then do your best to stick to it. And it's really going to pay dividends later on. So that great question. I appreciate it. And that is a much better answer than probably the one I would have given had I been looking directly at this FAQ. So it really does vary person to person. If anybody wants to make a study schedule, you can write one out, handwritten. It doesn't matter to me. Send it to me. I'll gladly look over it. And if you want even more insight, send that to me. And also give me a list of the subjects that, sort of you can rank from either strongest to weakest or in reverse order. And I'll gladly take a look, and I'll punch in my email here in the chat as well. One other thing, and this is not in my FAQs, I kept wondering if I should add it, and then I figured we would have in person. Let me get one more question, actually. I would, yes, because again, the bar prep program, those schedules are great. They really are, but they're even they would say they're generalities. You know, these things are not meant for, unless you have a tutor or somebody you're working with specifically, there's something that will work for a majority of people, but they're also designed to be tweaked a little bit as well. So I would definitely still make your own schedule. Even if your bar prep has one, make one that is in line sort of with the material that's being covered. If you're doing Civ Pro for 4 days, you know, don't make a schedule that's Civ Pro for 1 or for 10, right? So stay in line with whatever your bar prep is doing, but you can definitely tweak the hours and also kind of tweak, you know, if you don't feel ready for essay writing, or they want you to take closed book exams or something along those lines, those things can be modified too, I think, especially early on. I'm a huge proponent of something like open book exam writing to really work on your issue spotting and your analyzing and your structure and get all those things down, especially if you don't feel quite ready with having the law memorized yet. And send me a schedule, please. Sophia, you go ahead and send one. So let's see. So I was contemplating putting something in again regarding taking the exam online. Kept thinking it'll be moot point. Thought it again. Of course, it wasn't. We're still here. Notwithstanding, definitely practice doing things on a computer. Just like Jennifer was saying, the PT is number one, hands down, in terms of you really have to practice not only your overall PT theory. You know, I read the test memo, then I read the library, then obviously you need to have that down, but you have to practice your own sort of procedures, no pun intended, for, okay, when I note the issues in the test memo, do I want to use scratch paper? Do I want to go straight in and type these out? Do I want to, you know, try to highlight if that's available, copy and paste? How about when I spot a rule in the library? What's your process then? Again, do you use the scratch paper? Do you highlight? Do you make some notation somewhere else? Do you start typing these in immediately? Do you just type in the page and maybe a couple words of the rule? Same thing with a file. When I find facts that start to match up with my rules, what's my process? So that's something that should be done absolutely not under time conditions when you're practicing. Just, it's a trial and error. You're doing as many kind of variations of that process as you can, and you'll find something that works for you. But again, it just takes a little bit of practice, and it's really not a substantive exercise. You're not doing this portion of the PT when I'm saying to really understand what's going on in the PT, rather to make sure that when you're under pressure, okay, you have an exact format. Again, when I see a rule from a case, I'm going to immediately copy it verbatim, or I'm going to make a notation on scratch paper, or, you know, whatever it might be, you want to have that plan. There should be still physical scratch paper for the PT, which you show to the camera each time. So a lot of people I actually found didn't like using the scratch paper. I did this a bunch of times just to practice and give people ideas. You know, when you do it, obviously you learn a lot more. I actually liked the scratch paper. I'm a little bit of an outlier there, but to each their own. And when you do practice enough, you will get comfortable with whatever your process is. We should be back to 200 for that one. Let me pop this over. I'm going to go to, so definitely practice online. PT, obviously the essays too. That one is a little bit more, you're a little bit more limited in what you can and can't do for one. And it's a little bit easier to maneuver as well because you're not scrolling through 800 different documents. So let's see here. I wanted to go down to page 9. Yeah, right in the middle, there's a little IRAC chart. that I made there. Of course, percentages subject to change, but I'll kind of tell you why I put those down and sort of my theory on how you're getting graded. Having read a ton of essays in looking at something like Bar Essays, which is a great resource and has a ton of past essays. Gil runs that site, a really nice guy, a lot of good resources. There seems to be basically kind of three types of graders, again, because I've read so many of the same fact pattern and seen so many scores that tend to go all over the place. So typically what you're looking at is somebody that really values the issue spotting. You kind of get that grader, and the analysis needs to be there, of course, but for whatever reason, they seem to prioritize having those issues. If you have 8 or 9 out of 10, and even if your analysis is a little cursory in some areas, you still get a good grade, 75, something like that. Then you tend to get the flip side, which is you don't have all the issues, but the ones you did spot, you really went all in, used all the facts, presented counter arguments, really exhausted sort of that critical thinking and reasoning aspect of the exam. And those essays tend to get higher scores. And then of course you have the graders that seem to want both. And if you're lacking one of either, you're in the 50 range for whatever reason. So long way of saying can be a little inconsistent on the grading. However, obviously you want to make sure you understand sort of what the hierarchy is. Starting from the bottom up, looking at conclusions, definitely not getting graded on, if you found he was liable for negligence. That's not what your grade is hinging on. You need to conclude, of course, make a conclusion on each element and the overall issue. But that conclusion, honestly, at the end of the day, it just needs to follow from your analysis. That's what you need to be worried about there. So I put a 1%. I do that a little bit to illustrate the point. But I think you get what I mean there. For the rules, this one, I say 10% only because it's such a prerequisite to know the rules anyway. Obviously, you need to know them. Honestly, you could put this one at 100% or you could put it down at 10, just kind of depending on how you look at it. You have to know the rules going in or else you have no opportunity to analyze. So I gave it a lower percentage just because I'm assuming we're all going to be ready and we're going to have the law memorized. Looking at issues, I put that at about 25%. Really stress spotting all the issues, of course. Nothing surprising there. But at the end of the day, I do think the analysis, more oftentimes than not, is what's going to put you over the top. And the analysis is a few things. And I go in it, I'm not going to go over it tonight, but lower in the FAQ, I sort of have some examples there on the analysis portion. And what you want to ensure you're doing on the analysis is really avoiding what I call fact summarizing, which is regurgitating the facts and then concluding, but you're not putting anything in the middle there. And that in the middle portion would be really explaining the relevance of that fact to whatever law or issue you're discussing. Again, I go through that a little bit more down in the FAQ. And I did you hear a question? And I do give writing workshops and PT workshops and things like that. That's a really good question. Jennifer and I were just talking about that. I feel like the exam, now that it's been 3 cycles, they will have an option for an online taker, maybe for accommodation purposes or out-of-state takers or something like that. I would assume that remains. I would think they would want sort of the bulk of people to come in person again, but have way more flexibility in those that could take it online, because we've gone through so many cycles now that I'm sure of course, there's some complaints here and there, but they should be getting more efficient at having this exam online. So I would think that would continue.
Yeah, so I'm going to interrupt and I'm just going to say we really don't know. And I really think that it's going to continue online because it is actually cheaper for them to do it online than it's cheaper for them to do it online, or whether they're going to continue past the July exam online is yet to be determined. But it is a known fact that the test can be administered online, and they're doing it with the FYLSE as well. So we'll just see.
That way, there should be 2 that are required. Will you say something, Jennifer?
Yeah, I wanted to say that basically, I don't think anybody should have to go out and buy a new computer just to take the bar exam. If you've got a monitor on your laptop that's 17 inches, which is I think the biggest you can get, then that is basically that helps you when you're taking the test. If you think that your computer might have a potential of crashing, or if you've had it crash recently, then yeah, maybe you should get a new computer. I don't know. You have to make that decision, but yeah, my computer is was well over 5. Okay, skip forward again. The other question I think that was asked after this was typing speed. So we're going to go forward um, um, to more of the tips.
Some other things in here. And again, any questions, obviously ask me now. Any questions on the FAQ, email me as well. I don't think graders look down on writers at all. To me, writing versus typing. I've had a lot of people actually ask me this question that are in my course as well. Comfort level is what it always comes down to. There's not a set word per minute or word limit. I tend to think if you are analyzing fully, that on your essays you're probably around or over 1,000 words. That tends to be kind of the benchmark I see with some of the more fully developed essays. Does that mean if you're below 1,000 that you automatically fail? Of course not. And does it mean if you're above 1,000 that you automatically pass? No, because obviously the content of your writing is what matters, and your issue spotting at the end of the day. But I would definitely go with what you're more comfortable at. If it's a toss-up right now, I would practice my typing more and really do a lot of essays and analysis and do all that kind of work typing. I bet you get a lot more proficient at the typing over the next few months. Would be.
Okay. I'm going to stop there because there was something that I learned that helped me with my typing speed, and that was after I did a practice test, I would then type one of the released answers, and that helped me to get my speed up. It also helped me to see the issues that I missed or the rule statements that were not sufficient. So that's just one other way to do it to increase your speed. But I do make a point in here and I talk about it. I actually state you need to know the rules. If you don't have your rules down cold where you can just say, um, a contract is formed by offer, acceptance, and consideration, and know each one of those sub rules too as well, then you're not going to get it. Or like community property is property that is acquired after marriage, that is not acquired by gift, devise, descent, or bequest. Um, uh, and separate property is property that is acquired before marriage or after the marriage is terminated, and those gift examples that are in there. So those are things that you know and that you should be able to type really fast. And you need to have that typing very fast on the rule statement so that you can get to the analysis portion and analyze all the facts to meet the relevant elements. Okay, so we're going to move up. It's like passing 2 essays, so it really, if you really take the time now to start tailoring and doing PTs and understanding how to do a PT, then that's going to be to your benefit at the bar exam, because if you get a passing PT, you can fail 2 essays. No ifs, ands, or buts. So if you've got a California exam coming up and you have professional responsibility, you know all those rules, you can do a good job on the PT right there, plus your MBE scores are good, you've got a really good chance of passing. And it just means that you've got to know as much as you can on the subjects that you have difficulty in so that you can at least get a 60, 65 answer on them. So that's all I have to say, Daniel, if you want to finish up.
Yeah, give me 60 seconds. One other thing I just want to touch on that's probably a little different from what you've heard, and take it with a grain of salt or however, but on page 18, I talk about sample answers and sort of what they can or should not be used for. Again, it's kind of different for everybody. What I tell my students is people kind of read the sample answers and might copy them or really try to model their own writing style off of sample answers, which I say is extremely difficult because every sample answer you read is going to be by a different person. So really have, in my opinion, have your own set structure for how you analyze. It's not a creative writing course. So if your sentence structure is the same every time, here the facts state, David hurled the wallet at Peter, showing that he made a volitional movement and had intent. If that's your sentence structure for everything, great. You're get points for that because you're analyzing. So in looking at the sample answers, what I would use them for, check your issue spotting, and then check what I call the density of the issue. If you have negligence and you spent one paragraph on it, sample answer spends 2 pages, right? There's too much of a disparity there. And on the flip side, if you spent 2 pages on contract formation and the sample answer spends a paragraph, that's something you can go back and sort of analyze, why did I do so much here? So using sample answers correctly, I think, is something that's really not talked about a lot and can cause some anxiety for students if everything doesn't match up completely in terms of how they literally structure their sentences and wrote. That's going to differ from person to person. So that was the last thing I wanted to say there. Hopefully these tips help a little bit. And again, send me any questions you have or throw them in the chat. I'm always around to answer questions. So.
All right. So I think that's it for tonight. I really appreciate you coming, Daniel, and thank you all for coming. If you have any questions for me, you've got my email, and I will be seeing you next week. Thanks again, Daniel.
Appreciate it, Jennifer. Have a good night, everybody.